It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here this evening for the formal launching of our foundation, and I'm most appreciative of this wonderful turnout. I first met Vanessa 6 years ago when she approached my colleague Jim Gould at Covington for assistance in clearing legal obstacles for what became a truly remarkable and memorable documentary called The Decent Ones. It was a stunning tribute to her. She uncovered previously unknown papers of the architect of the Holocaust, Himmler, and was determined to make a film that would let the world look into his soul, such as it was. Indeed, it is a remarkable documentary about how someone could have had, as the documentary indicates, a seemingly normal family life at the same time as he was butchering Jewish families. Jim Gould and Reed and I have had no hesitation in agreeing to help her on a pro bono basis because we see the importance of not only preserving the information that she is uncovering, but also producing the film that made it possible. We did what we could to help and watch with admiration as Vanessa and her colleagues achieved that goal. And when the film was done, we saw a tour de force of locating and restoring precious and irreplaceable film footage that was on the verge of crumbling away. And so that really has taken us to the next stage. When Vanessa and Tomer came to us with this new mission, we were only too happy to help and get the foundation up and running. This has meant a lot of essential work to build a platform for their project, getting IRS approval of the foundation as a nonprofit, and making any gifts you give tax deductible. But I've seen also some of the initial footage as it was located before its restoration by the foundation. And it is amazing and inspirational to see what she has been doing with film that seemed irretrievable and that now has been put into remarkable form to tell a story of the Jewish people worldwide and of the earliest days of pre-state Israel in Palestine. Much of what I've done over the past 30 years has coincided with what Vanessa and Tomer have done in trying to keep alive justice for Holocaust survivors. I began with President Carter in getting him to create the Presidential Commission on the Holocaust, chaired by Eliav, that led directly to the Holocaust Museum, which has now had 50 million visitors. 50 million visitors since it opened in 1993, 3/4 of whom are non-Jewish. It's remarkable to see people coming in 4,000 or 5,000 a day, school kids from Ohio, police officers from Colorado, midshipmen from the Naval Academy learning about tolerance. Second, was serving for 8 years in the Clinton administration as, among other things, as special advisor and representative on Holocaust issues and negotiating $8 billion in recoveries from the Swiss and Germans and Austrians and French and European insurance companies and art restitution and the like. Third, and I'm doing this with my revered colleague who is with us tonight, Roman Kent, who's my co-chair for the Jewish Claims Conference for our regular negotiations with the German government, which, by the way, since 1952, and the German Consul General is here, has contributed over $60 billion to survivors. And since Roman and I have been working together, he earlier than me, but since we've been doing it together in 2009, we've gotten over $2 billion in completely new benefits for home care for elderly survivors the world over, flight victims, and children. Fourth, and that really dovetails with tonight, is my involvement with the Defiant Requiem and the Defiant Requiem Foundation, which is a concert drama that we've taken all over the world and all over the United States to great acclaim, which tells the story of the Jewish prisoner chorus at Eisenstadt. We found original survivors, and I'm absolutely thrilled that one of our most important board members, and I think almost everyone in the room will know, Patty Kenner, is here tonight. I found from the Defiant Requiem exercise, because we found footage, remarkable footage, of the original chorus and of the survivors themselves, the importance of visual media in bringing home, not only to us, but more important to the next generation, about what happened during the Holocaust and its relevance to what's happening today. Now we have, with Vanessa and Tomer, a foundation to track down and preserve film footage. These incredibly determined people have astonished me and Jim and Reed and a lot of others by locating, restoring, and digitizing previously deteriorating film footage that would have been lost forever, and our history would have been lost forever had they not located it. It's really remarkable, and you'll see some of that tonight. I can't think of anything more uplifting than what the Foundation for Preserving Our Visual Jewish History has undertaken as its mission, and it's just at its infancy. This documentary is only one piece of it. I think more important will be what they've found. You'll see, early footage of Winston Churchill coming into Palestine in the 20s. Parts of our history which would be forgotten. And by seeing it, young kids will be able to understand the history of Israel in ways they would never have been able to do simply by reading about it. I'm proud to be a member of the board and to support the foundation. We have a very important member of our group, Eric Mayer, who is here. Eric, thank you for your support, but also in addition to Danny and as was introduced already, the Council Generals of Germany and Austria, we also have a quite remarkable person, Larky Remke, senior diplomat at the Moroccan Embassy. And the fact that the Moroccan Embassy is here tonight is a very important, I think, message. And there's a U.S. connection, too, because my dear friend Marc Ginsberg, who was a U.S. ambassador to Morocco, will be participating with Mr. Remke later in the day. Now, when we were organizing this event and we sat down with Jim and Reed and Tomer and Vanessa to get the names of people who might be possible keynote speakers, we came up with 3 names in this order: Abe Foxman, Abe Foxman, and Abe Foxman. Because there's no one who could be a more perfect complement to launch our foundation than Abe. Abe's parents fled with him as an infant from Poland to Lithuania, where to save his life they were forced to give him to the care of his Polish Catholic nanny, who baptized him raised him as a Catholic, took him to Mass, and after the war did not want to give him back. When his parents finally and miraculously survived and returned, he was able to come back to his parents, and not without difficulty. But Abe has told me very personally, and I hope you don't mind me sharing it, but I think it's such an incredible story, that here's someone who was raised in his formative years as a Catholic, and his father is taking him to synagogue, and his priests come by. Abe is conflicted. What does he do with the priest? What does he do with the rabbi? Abe obviously, in miraculous ways, worked his way through this. They went from cross borders. They were smuggled from the Soviet Union to displaced persons camps in the American zone in Austria, apropos the Consul General being here. And finally, 5 years after the war, they finally made it to the United States. The rest really was and has been history. Starting in 1965, he began his remarkable tenure with the Anti-Defamation League, heading their international division, and then from 1987 to 2015, being their national director and the face of the ADL to the world. This had a particular connection to me, not simply because our intersections in various Jewish and national enterprises, but because, ironically, of my Atlanta connection. You can't tell it, I'm sure, from my accent, but I do come from the South. And the connection is that when I grew up in Atlanta, I don't think I ever met a survivor. But what was, even then, some 45, 50 years later, still burnt into the DNA of Atlanta Jewry was the hanging of Leo Frank. And it was that incident, Abe, as you well know, in 1913 that actually led to the creation of ADL. And so that's always given us an unusual connection. Abe's early experience in the Catholic community has been a basis for his leadership in the remarkably successful, and it is really remarkably successful, Catholic-Jewish dialogue. We shouldn't for a minute, I think, Abe, of all the things you've done, and there's so many, this to me is one of the indelible marks you've made in America, the Catholic-Jewish reconciliation, which broke down ancient animosities toward Jews. And you've broadened that, recognizing that one of the most important defenses for Jews is to make common cause with others who suffer discrimination, whether it's gays or Muslims or African Americans or Hispanics or immigrants. And so you've been a voice in the broadest way for the best of America. You are, in short, an inspiration. You give a new definition to the term mensch, and you honor us, Abe, by your presence and your support. Please come and address us.
I think your introduction is going to be longer than my keynote. Wow. Ambassador Stuart Eizenstat, friend, honored honorees, Vanessa and Tomer, ambassadors, consul generals, and dear friends. I listened to Stu, but I'm still struggling how to best explain why I am here tonight. But in a way, the answer was made very clear, very simply by Stu. I'm not a videographer, I'm not a filmmaker, I'm not a movie critic. Was tue ich da? What is Mashmita Lahar Sinai? What does this have to do? Why am I here? And it's a very simple answer, maybe one which is a little bit more profound, but the simple answer you've just heard. How do you say no? How do you say no to Stuart Eizenstat? Or for that matter, Eric Meyer, who called me 10 minutes before to prepare me that Ambassador Stuart's going to call me and ask me to do something without saying what. How do you say no to Stu, who has never, never, never said no to any call on behalf of the Jewish people? And so, in a very simple explanation, I said yes, and that's what I'm here. But aside from that, why? Why are we here? Lama, Favos, why? What brings us here? You've heard some of it by Ambassador Danny Dayan, but I want to enlarge on it a little bit. We are here because as a people, the Jewish people, we are a people of history. A history which teaches us, instructs us, protects us, envelops us, sometimes enslaves us, and liberates us. It's that so much part of who we are is history. And that all these generations of the last several thousand years, it was memory, primarily that referred us to our history. By the oral and by the written word that protected our history. And now as we are in a time period when we are enveloped and battered by its one tsunami after another of words, we are awakening to a realization that words alone, may not be enough to sustain our memory, to protect our history and our peoplehood. Yes, we have been commanded to zachor and yizkor, to remember, not to forget. We were told, as you just heard from Danny, to teach, to transmit. That's what the Haggadah is all about. You should teach and tell your children. And that was what? The major vehicle was the Word. And we moved in history from Torah Baal Peh to Torah B'chtav, from oral law. And then we worried that the oral law was not enough. It wasn't precise, and it may pervert, etc. And we took this leap of faith into saying, not just the oral law, now you have to put it on paper and write it. And so the written word for a long, long time was sort of our insurance, our guarantee that we can transmit this history, this memory, by word of mouth and by the written word. All that before the communication of revolution, not of the internet, but of sound and of sight. That too was a major revolution which began to impact on our memory and our history. We gather here tonight in a sacred site. It is a place of memory. It is a place of history. It is a museum dedicated to the memory and history of the victims of the Shoah, as well as to our heritage. And it reminds me of two recent incidents, recent memory incidents, that illustrate to me so very graphically our mission, the mission of the foundation that brings us here. General Dwight David Eisenhower, when he liberated some camps and came face to face with the gruesome reality of the handiwork of anti-Semitism and hatred, he ordered two things. He ordered that in all the places of the camps that the local German population be forced to come to view and to see. So nobody in future times will be able to say, we didn't know, we didn't see, it was not us, etc. But he also did something else. He ordered the military filmmakers to photograph everything they saw in the camps, because he knew then and worried then that there will come a time where people will challenge that it ever happened. Number two, when Eichmann was brought to trial, and we will be having in this museum an exhibit on the capture of Eichmann starting in July of this year. When Eichmann was brought to trial, that morning of the trial in Jerusalem, I don't know how many in this room remember the name Dave Garroway. Dave Garroway was the Today Show. And Dave Garroway announced that today in Jerusalem is the beginning of a trial of a man who's charged with being instrumental in bringing about the murder of 6 million Jews. And then he said, what does 6 million mean? How do you communicate it? And he said, if you are squeamish or if you have children in the room having breakfast, maybe you take them into another room. And then he played a film clip of Jews being unloaded from a truck lined up in a ravine and murdered. And then he said, if you want to understand the number 6 million, you have to sit and watch this film clip 8 hours a day for 3 years, 2 months, 1 week, and 8 hours. And I have never been able to erase that visual, because to struggle to explain the enormity was only through that visual and that gimmick, if you will, which forever and ever will sear it in everybody's mind. So as you know, as Stu shared with you, I survived the Holocaust. And as I matured and tried to struggle with the meaning of what it is that I survived, I was very fortunate to have my parents to whom I could turn to and ask questions. And when in my undergraduate years at City College, I wrote a paper on the Vilna ghetto because it was in Vilna that I survived outside of the gates of the ghetto. And I did my research from diaries. And I went to my father and I said to him, Tatashi, I don't understand. In the midst of hell, these people bartered bread for a piece of paper, bartered a bowl of soup for some ink, when the difference of survival, of life or death, depended on that one slice of bread or one bowl of soup. I said, Farvos, why? And he said to me, because they feared that they will have lived and died, and nobody would know. And how ironic that now we know how many films were made of their life and their death. And I thought this week, if they only knew that the record, as perverted as it was for what it perverted reasons, would bear testimony, maybe they would have not bartered that piece of bread or that bowl of soup. And finally, very personally, just to share with you what a visual means. When my parents and I smuggled the borders out of Poland into the American zone in Austria, and we crossed the frontiers, we crossed as displaced Turks. And I was a little bit blonde, a little bit blue-eyed. It was a little tough. But I was told to be deaf and dumb because I only spoke Polish and Russian, some Greek, some Turk. And, okay, we made it. And much later, I found out that my father had smuggled out photographs of my nanny. And when I understood enough to say to him, Tatashi, if the Soviets at the frontier discovered those pictures and said to you, who is this Turkish lady with this infant, we could have not been able to cross that frontier. And he said to me, called me Henechel, I wasn't sure that you would remember her. And I wanted to make sure that forever and ever and ever you would have the image of Bronislava Korpi in front of your eyes. And you know what? I don't know. I don't know if he hadn't smuggled those pictures out, what image I would have, or any image, of the woman who risked her life for 4 years to save me. And so in a very metaphysical way, if you want, yes, I'm here because Stu asked me. But I guess I'm also here because I so deeply, deeply, deeply understand the value, the significance in this day and age of the visual. And at a time where not only our history is being challenged, but not only our memory is being challenged through Holocaust denial, through ugly, recent, and ancient anti-Semitism, through challenging Israel's legitimacy. We need every weapon. We need every tool. We need every entity that exists, not only to make sure that we remember, not only to make sure that the history is there, but also to provide for the truth. And the mission, if you look at the program, the mission is oh so simple: to locate, to preserve, to protect the truth of our memory and our history. And finally, Vanessa and Tomer were a pain in the neck. Was willst du von mir? What do you want? We're here because they so understood. You know, I said earlier in the cocktail party to some people, I'm not sure that 1 in 25 people here could explain to you why they're here. They're here because somebody said to them, come, it's important. Well, now everybody will understand why you're here. And thank you, Stu, for getting me to say yes, because I learned an awful lot. And I understand a lot of things so much better about this whole issue. But Vanessa and Tomer, where are you? Darton. Thank you. Thank you for making it possible for us to have this impact on the future of our people, our memory, and our history. And thank you all for being here.
Good evening. If you look at your program, you'll find that everybody has a biography except me. And next to my name, it says mission. And that mission has just been defined. So I have to thank the organizers of the program, for they have made a righteous man out of me. You all know the Hebrew expression that righteous people have their work done by others. And the three people who preceded me have, in effect, explained to you what it is that we're about. But let me tell you what it is that I'm really here for. I'm not a philanthropist. I'm not the head of an important organization. I'm not an ambassador. I'm a consumer. I'm a historian. And the reason why I'm involved in this is because I know the significance of what it is that they're doing, not just for theaters, but for college classrooms. Think about this. In 1900, 83% of the Jews of the world were in Europe. Today, more than 80% of the Jews in the world are now in Israel and in North America. You have, and we are, and our children and our grandchildren are going through one of the most momentous periods in the history of the Jewish people. It's a period not only of destruction, but it is a period of regeneration and creation. I would wager to you that as we think of the millennial, and it's only 3,700 years of history, but in the millennia to come, as people look back, and particularly Jews, but not only, on what were the significant periods in the history of the Jewish people, we're living it right now. And as they look and try to understand that period, they're going to look and write their history in ways that I was not trained to do so as a graduate student. I was told that a document can fit in a 3x5 card. You can write it down, you can take a note, and if it isn't written, maybe it doesn't exist. But we now know that there are other kinds of documentation. We have documentary filmmakers. My son is going to graduate tomorrow with a degree, an MFA in documentary filmmaking. In an earlier generation, he might have become a historian like me. What this really means is that our generation looks at new kinds of evidence. I've been privileged, my home is in Israel. I was privileged to come to Brandeis to establish the Schusterman Center for Israel Studies, where over the last decade, we've trained 300 academics from literally China to India to Europe, North and South America, to teach Israel. Nobody, whether they're teaching sociology, international relations, economics, or what have you, can teach a course on that country without using film, or music, or literature. Film is essential. In fact, so much so that I wish some of my students would not take a course in Israel that's given through the Film Studies program, but actually read books that I assign them. But that's part of the world in which we live. That's part of the future. Put it to you this way. The first thing we created when we invented the center at Brandeis was a cheer for visual culture. Not economics, not sociology, but visual culture, and it was recognition that the students who were coming to our classes needed and wanted to see history, not just read about it. And that, in fact, is the future. The word in Hebrew for seeing is chazot, lachzot, to see. But in Hebrew, it has an extra meaning. It's not only to see, but it's to foresee. And in effect, what I'm trying to tell you is that for our generation, it's important that we see that through which we and our parents and our grandparents have gone through. But it is also important for us to foresee, to try to imagine how future generations will use the record that we create through this kind of foundation as they try to understand, interpret, and reinterpret the extraordinary, momentous times through which we are living. I'm glad to be part of this project. I do so for my colleagues and for my students and for their students. And I thank you for being here and for, I hope, support this. The implications of what this organization is going to do cannot be entirely foreseen, but will have surely an impact in the generations to come. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the privilege of passing this award on to the distinguished representative of the Moroccan Embassy who is with us tonight. And so I know that you have a few words to say on behalf of the government and people of Morocco. So please accept this on behalf of this wonderful organization. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellencies, my dear friend, Secretary Stuart Eisenstadt, dearest Eric Meyer, Abraham Foxman, and Ambassador Ginsberg, ladies and gentlemen, allow me, I would like to extend to you all my sincerest apologies for not being with you tonight, and I'm truly missing a poignant and very significant moment which means a lot for me. As you may know, I have devoted my entire life to building a culture of trust, a culture of peace and mutual respect between Jews and Muslims. As a young boy, I was taught by my rabbis that to nurture and preserve my Jewishness in Morocco is a matter of dignity and justice for all Moroccans. I was fortunate enough to be born on the Moroccan Atlantic shores in the marvelous city of Essaouira Mogador, a city which for centuries has been a vibrant center of Jewish life, and the only city in the Islamic world that at one point hosted a Jewish majority. I have often said that Essaouira is the microcosm of Morocco, a land rich on its deeply rooted diversity and where Islam and Judaism nourish each other. I began my long journey for a just peace in the Middle East in the 70s, when I founded a group, Identity and Dialogue in Paris. I have, through the decades, tried to show the world that Islam and Jewish cultures are not opposite, but intercultural, interdependent, and complementary. In my recent work for the United Nations Alliance of Civilization and as president of Euro-Mediterranean Annalene Foundation, I have tried to tell the world that a Moroccan Jewish culture and identity nurtured in the heart of Arab-Muslim world would be diminished without its Muslim counterpart, just as Moroccan civilization would be incomplete without the enriching influence of Judaism and Hebrew. And it is from this perspective that, along with my fellow Muslim Moroccan counterparts, I have been lucky enough to put my hometown, Essaouira Mogador, on the map as a Mediterranean flagship city for intercultural dialogue and as a resilient crossroads city for everything related to cultural, human, and spiritual relation between Judaism and Islam. One of the 7 festivals I have launched in Essaouira is exclusively dedicated to singers, musicians, and dancers, Jewish and Muslim, who once a year are gathered by thousands to perform together, to sing together, and simply to enjoy being together. It is a fascinating experiment, and it is from a Muslim that this message is sent to the world. Dearest friend, as you can imagine, I'm fairly frustrated for not being, for missing this ceremony, celebrating and recognizing one of my life's many efforts. To build and promote a culture of mutual knowledge and equal respect between Arab and Muslims. I am deeply grateful to you all for the work you are doing to documenting Jewish history around the world, and especially for dedicating this special and memorable moment to my country, Morocco, which under the vibrant and visionary leadership of His Majesty King Mohammed VI has become a beacon on convivencia and cultural resilience the world over. This award gratifies me to no end. Thank you very much. Andre Azoulay, advisor to His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, Rabat, 11 May 2017. Thank you.
Good evening. For over 30 years, Aviva Kempner has been making entertaining and meaningful movies about Jewish heroes who remain inspirational. Her masterful incorporation of archival footage anchors all of her films. This Washington, D.C.-based filmmaker began by conceiving and producing Partisans of Vilna about 37 years ago. It was the first documentary to focus on Jewish resistance during World War II, and it was rooted in the ghetto of Vilna. Then she directed the award-winning Life and Times of Hank Greenberg, about the baseball legend, and then You Who, Mrs. Goldberg, an affectionate portrait of the pioneering TV and radio star Gertrude Berg, and it also explored the shame and the pain caused by the blacklist. Rosenwald, her most recent film, could be considered the third part of a trilogy. It tells the amazing story of a Jewish philanthropist who understood the challenges faced by young African Americans and created schools throughout the South. She is currently working on a documentary about Mo Berg, not merely a baseball star, but a spy for the Office of Strategic Services during World War II. Julius Rosenwald's motto was "Give while you live," and this is certainly true of our honoree. It is my pleasure to welcome Aviva Kempner.
Thanks so much to Annette Insdorf for such a lovely introduction. Both Annette and in the audience, Eva Fogelman, we feel like we're sisters, and they've been my great moral and intellectual support in my filmmaking. It's great also to be here this evening. Abe Foxman, as you know, my first film was about Vilna. He helped me both in the stories of his experience and actually in fundraising and made that film possible. And to be with Stu Eizenstat, who shares in Holocaust memory, I really appreciate it. I'm also thrilled to have my family here, my brother Jonathan, my nieces Delaney and Piera, and my cousin Allison, and many of my friends, and especially Sharon Revo, who the National Center for Jewish Film is the non-theatrical distributor of all my films. You know, you may wonder why I'm here tonight, and I think the story goes way back. My blonde, green-eyed mother, Hanka Czesla, survived the Holocaust, passing as a Polish Gentile in Germany. Now, what Mother did is similar story in a way that Abe told. She risked being discovered as a Jew because she sewed in her coat photos of her parents and her sister. Sadly, they perished in Auschwitz while her brother Dudek survived. Those family photos were the only pictures my brother and I had to figure out who our grandparents were, as well as our aunt. It was our only link to the past. And my mother's courage in carrying those photos, as well as surviving the war, as well as my Uncle David Chase, inspired me to visually document Jewish heroes through cinema. We can't make our films without these images, and I believe that through celluloid images, we can best document our rich Jewish heritage for posterity. And in the 3 languages of all my films, Toda Rabah, Shalom Dank, thank you.
I'm here tonight to recognize a heroine of our faith, a servant of her country, an outstanding photojournalist of World War II, a correspondent of a great newspaper which unfortunately disappeared, the Herald Tribune, and somebody that had courage with defiance, and courage that shamed powerful people into helping her do the impossible. She struck into the inferno against all odds and rescued over 1,000 of our compatriot children, Jewish children, out of Europe. She did that with a willpower that was incredible, with a courage that is not to be duplicated. I wish we could. With a determination that very few did. But she also was a master of her trade who recorded the history of the time, of our Jewish misery and subjugation and our rebirth. She had friends throughout the world. What made her great is that she was a woman of the world who saw no discrimination anywhere and did the rescue of the Jewish children. She would have done the same of everyone else. That was her life. We cannot forget it. She taught us that being righteous is the most important thing in our life. She was a righteous of our people. She would be very proud tonight if when I award her this distinction, this honor, we would share it with the righteous of the world and of her time. And there, while we cannot enumerate all of them, I want to enumerate a few that will represent all of them. But no honor, no award, no words engraved in a piece of glass can really honor those people. And Ruth Gruber, not to forget her, because that was my primary purpose. If we leave here tonight, we really want to honor all of these people, we have to take stock of what's happening in the world today. And in our own small way, we have to be righteous. We have to defy the purveyors of hate. We have to fight the scourge of disease and hunger. We have to fight intolerance. And unless we do that, the honor that we present on the glass tonight is very meaningless. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Doris Schechter, and how fortunate was I that Ruth Gruber was the escort to bring 1,000 refugees from Naples, Italy to New York City. Many. I was 6 years old at the time, and I was fortunate enough to reconnect with Ruth many, many years later. And she became my mentor, my inspiration, my best friend, and I was so fortunate to have her in my life for over 35 years. And also, I was so privileged because she was so inspirational on every level that I was able to be part of making the documentary on her life to help other women of all ages to be inspired by this very extraordinary woman. And I thank you so much for allowing me to accept her award. So thank you. I feel very lucky and fortunate to be here this evening, and all the best for everyone.
Hi, I'm Patty Kenner, the other half of the Ahead of Time film team. Ruth Gruber never took a photography course. She once met Edward Steichen, the great photographer, who said to her, "Ruth, take pictures with your heart." Doris and I accept this award in memory of Ruth Gruber, whose legacy is the collection of photographs that Ruth took with her heart. Doris and I will give this to the Museum of Jewish Heritage to be kept here in her memory. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much. We're going to go and restore lots of footage, and hopefully next year we're going to screen you all the footage that we did restore this year. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.